Hi, I'm Sterling Hart, and this is Dreamlight, where we work with dream interpretation and using the insights in the waking life. Do other people influence your dreams? So to be clear, we don't mean the normal psychological dream influence, where you are with people on Saturday and they influence the dreams you wake up with on Sunday morning. But rather, is there some sort of subtle influence, intentional or not, that someone is exerting in your dreams? The difficulty of this question is that it is really about how developed the awareness is. We have to distinguish between the psychological level of dreaming versus the subliminal level. The psychological level is most dreams, which represent a reflection of what we are focused on during the day. These are your subconscious patterns, made up of previous experiences, your conditioning, desires, emotions, and memories. The subliminal level deals with the deeper resources and the more subtle layers of who we are. So what I mean by level of awareness is because there are people who have a dream, they worry it may be prescient, that it shows them the future, or they tend to take the dream literally. For instance, someone dreams they or someone they know dies in a dream, and they fear this foreshadows someone's death. But if you interpret the dream, you find that the person dying is a metaphor for psychological death, not of the person, but of some personality aspect. Even if the death is of a friend in the dream, that other person turns out to be an aspect of yourself. For example, the metaphor could deal with graduating from high school, as the person enters into a new phase of life, and the dream deals with the death of the old life. We want to stay grounded and clear. Subliminal dreams are the ones where people do have prevision of the future events, sometimes a direct knowing or image, sometimes via symbols as per an ordinary dream. These kinds of dreams can contain messages, guidance, or contact from deceased people or unknown people and beings, and all sorts of knowledge at a distance. Most people only have these kind of dreams rarely. They may also have a dream like a prevision and not recognize it as that. Things get verified afterward by unfolding events. Later, with experience, they begin to recognize these, but there is still an intermediate time where a strong desire can cause one to want or understand a dream as one of these when it isn't. Been there, done that. Hence the need to stay grounded and clear. So what kinds of influence do other people have? That sounds like a good question, but we also have to deal with what allows them to have an influence. These two things go together. Well, we need to look at three types of subliminal dreams that deal with influence. We can divide these into three categories: the witness, communication, and the responder. The first is the witness. This is where you become aware of something that someone is doing, or you have a dream of the person and then meet them unexpectedly. It is not really about them influencing it as it is you are seeing something that is happening. I had a dream where I journeyed down into a cave. There was this burning smell of food, and I arrived at a pit where there was lava and it erupted. I got the sense that it was anger as I woke up. I was quite far away from the eruption in the dream, and nothing really happened other than me witnessing it. So in the waking time, when I got home from work that day, I found my roommate had gotten inflicted with rage and took it out on the kitchen. This made sense from the dream. In looking back, I could tell this anger had been smoldering for some time about how the kitchen was being used. So did the anger influence my dream, or did I sense the anger and dream of it? At best, the influence in this example is a command of attention. Another example is, my friend went through a phase of lucid dreaming where it happened several times a week for several months. He wanted to see if we could travel together. He was going to come and try to wake me up. So he came to my house looking for me during his dream time. The next day when I talked to him, he hadn't been able to find me. He came to a room and described it. It was a very accurate description of my roommate's room. He had a fishing rod hanging from the ceiling. There were also things in the dream that aren't there in the waking, but they were good symbols of what my roommate is actually like. My lucid friend had never been to my house in the waking time. In the next attempt, he found me, and I was busy dealing with something. I was wrestling a minotaur, which described the kind of issue I was having at the time. In neither of the attempts was I aware of my friend nor lucid, but he was able to come and see things of a psychological and physical nature. So again, it seems less like influence and more like observing. I have met healers, one who could deliberately, the other it occasionally happened to, who were able to take this another step and enter the dream state both lucidly and non-lucidly to see what is going on with the person and then to be able to work with the person in the waking time. But they weren't really affecting them in the dream time. The second type is the communication dream. These dreams contain messages or insights from a guide or sometimes from an unknown person or deceased person. I knew of someone who saw their mother return in a dream and tell them they could sometimes briefly come back and that they didn't need to worry about their father. In the waking time, the father was seriously ill, but he fully recovered. The person is influenced by a message. It contains special knowledge, but just like in the waking time when we get a phone call, it is not so much the person influencing us against our will. Sometimes people dream psychological dreams of cryptic messages that have to be deciphered. Those usually deal with normal insights. The third type is the responder. This is where you are reacting to something. It could be the appearance of the person, or it could be something you associate with the person. It can be in symbolic language. Often these are dealing with emotions, but sometimes there is a kind of intent that one is picking up, a will force that seems to act on us. But this is due to some part of ourselves that has an affinity for it. For negative things, you can think of it as a weakness that lets it get the better of you, or you can say it pushes your buttons. If someone is enthralled with us or angry, it can cause them to focus on us or their image of us. That focus and intent can be picked up in dreams. If we think about the waking life, we can point to some people being able to influence us, especially when we were younger. We can come under somebody's sway. Motivational speakers can often give us a vision and emotional fuel to agree or believe in something. We get fired up or inspired when they are speaking, and then this fades a short time after. I worked with a woman briefly who had been raised in a household where girls were second-class people. She had internalized this to some degree. She was quite beautiful and she attracted all sorts of men and women to her. She had gone through a series of boyfriends who were abusive, but at the same time provided her with a feeling of being safe because they were very controlling and possessive. She was aware of all this and realized that she felt powerless in a relationship, but liked it because it felt safe to her. And she always had people who wanted to help, but at a certain point she would rebel and escape the situation. In her case, she was colluding with her boyfriends. They had roles to play. She would be submissive if the other person was in control. She needed a lot of attention. When the boyfriend got tired of her neediness, the boyfriends wanted someone to control, they would just stop paying attention to her, and this broke things. The roles were no longer being played, and she would leave. It was a shared emotional space. In dreams, we can pick up on others' emotions being projected on us. If it affects us, this is because we are open to it at some level. So you have to deal with the person in the waking time in an appropriate way, and you have to deal with your reaction. Most dreams are not mental ones. They have ideas and refer to mental outlooks, but are usually dealing with emotions. So a dream about part of our personality or one of our roles ending usually doesn't reflect upon our thoughts, but the feelings and the sense of meaning, the values. A meaning generated by how we feel about it. They reference our ego aims and identifications. So when someone is influencing our dreams, most likely it's the emotions that we pick up on. Basically, we were talking about empathy. Then you yourself react to it. So it is not so much about them controlling you through some sort of shamanistic force or psychic weapons. In the subliminal consciousness, you are more aware and have all sorts of resources. You have communication with others, move about in subtle worlds. Much of these experiences rarely reach the waking consciousness. Usually people come to accept this idea because they experience all sorts of flows of people and events that seem to be arranged by a hidden hand. You happen to walk into the right place and right time by chance and discover something important. In many cases, there is a mutuality that goes with it. It is important to you and other people, though it may not be obvious to either. You haven't experienced, but the feeling is that various aspects of your life have led up to this. You have intuitions about events or people, and this is verified as things unfold. Not everything is this way, however, just as there are ordinary dreams and ordinary thoughts and emotions, and getting clear, removing the preferences, the influence of old conditioning, desires, ego influences, all these things block and distort your access to these deeper resources. Of course, some people have a natural ability or awareness, and these deeper resources are already incorporated into the way they live. Many people will know when their child is in trouble before they get the text messages. They'll feel it at a distance. How well they can figure out the source of an uncomfortable feeling is an aspect of self-awareness. It may not make sense or register until the message comes via text or a phone call. Your mind is invested and builds up worlds of understanding with the things that you focus on. So of course your family and your work take up more of that inner world, and you are more likely to respond to things that have a place in that inner world. My friend went through a bad divorce with an emotionally abusive person. It was never physical. And she used to have these nightmares where she was being stalked by either her husband or something that represented him. There were some common elements that also were about dealing with the financial part of the relationship and with certain personal possessions. After working with these dreams, there was a sense of the ex-husband being very angry and also depressed. Some of these dreams contained elements that were pre-visions of encounters or near encounters. One showed a car parked at a friend's, and she knew not to go over to her friend's house that day, and sure enough he had turned up looking for her. In another, she knew not to go shopping at a particular store because he had started shopping there hoping to run into her. She discovered this when a friend went there for her and saw his car. So, influence. She was influenced by the dreams because they were nightmares and did represent a subliminal working, but the emotional conditions and suffering were already present and was part of moving through that life situation. One of the jobs I had was as a clerk at the front desk. I made a study of people and reactions. So at the same workplace, my coworker and I had to train people to run the front desk. There were a lot of different things you had to know how to do, not hard things, just many of them, and you might only see or need to know some of them once a month. When we got the newbie ready to go to work, they would often be nervous. The first few times the new person would run the desk, they would get the worst customers coming in. Once they were confident, then those people just wouldn't appear. It was like they were a magnet. So I began working with the idea of being open. When you see someone, you tend to treat them as you remember them. You attach yourself to a certain view of the person. These are things we look at with people we know that comes up in dreams. How do we view them? It is like a reunion with a close friend you haven't seen in years. Old parts of yourself will often come back with memories. At work, it was a university town, and one incident I remember, because I was trying to practice this concept of openness with customers, was a PhD candidate from Germany who came in. I could tell he was stressed and that English was a second language. He was a good speaker, but his rhythm was off as he would hear things and kind of translate them. He was under a lot of pressure and frustrated and completely rude, very curt. He came in a few weeks later and was completely different, friendly, made a joke. The lesson was applied even as he walked in was to not treat him as if he were inherently this rude and frustrated guy. So I wasn't defensive when he walked in. I tried to be open and treat him as if I had just met him. This is difficult. Our subconscious comes in and colors things. What we judge, we tend to keep. Our perceptions will tend to follow our expectations. If you judge a person to be angry, you will tend to perceive them that way. If you think a gender or ethnic group is a certain way, you will tend not to see them at all, but only the things that confirm your bias. So if we have someone influencing us in dreams, it is because we have an opening to a certain kind of reactions. This can be from trauma, ignorant habit, emotional indulgence. There is something in us that identifies with the person or something that they do that we observe, and we are susceptible. There are people who have dreams of guides, people or beings that come in dreams and give messages or instructions, sometimes teachings. It is possible that there are other beings who are the antithesis of this, sure. But the messages and teachings are something that we also have to be open to. There is usually a long preparation and waking movement and involvement in something before a dream with a guide or teaching happens. The same is the case for negative things. Using some means of protection may help, but that help is primarily through setting the mind up to react differently. So if you think you are protected, you will act on it. It sets up an expectation. If that is the case, of course, if you believe you will be influenced in dreams, it's true. If you don't believe you will be influenced in dreams, it's also true. This would be an interesting one to hear people's stories, so feel free to comment below. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up. If you want more dreams, please subscribe. I'm Sterling Hart, and this is Dreamlight.